Hey, there's been a lot of buzz going around about GPT-5, and I wanted to clear things up in this video. I'll break down the rumor, which Alberto Romero recently talked about in a pretty detailed article. He dives deep into where GPT-5 might be at right now. But this video isn't just about GPT-5. It's also about the bigger picture of where the entire AI industry seems to be heading. There might even be some secretive projects happening in AI labs that you should definitely know about. So, let's dive in. So, as you can see here, the article kicks off by talking about this rumor surrounding GB5, and honestly, it really does change everything. It's not just an exaggeration. This actually has the potential to shift everything. Once we dive into the details, you'll see why. Because the way these models are going to be released is going to be completely different. Let's dive into what this article has to say. It talks about GPT-5 and starts with a bold claim. What if I told you GPT-5 is not only real, but is already making an impact in ways you can't see? That's the main idea or hypothesis this article revolves around. The article credits a specific user for the theory, which suggests that OpenAI has already developed GPT-5, but is keeping it under wraps. Why? According to the claim, the return on investment, ROI, is much greater if they keep it internal, rather than making it accessible to millions of ChatGPT users. But here's the twist. The ROI isn't just about money, it's something else entirely. The concept seems simple at first glance, but the real challenge is piecing together the clues that support this theory. The article takes a deep dive into these connections and argues that it all makes sense. In short, the article suggests that OpenAI has created GPT-5, and it's an incredible model, truly groundbreaking. However, they've chosen not to release it yet, and the reason behind this decision is fascinating. That's what we're going to explore in this breakdown. So, one of the interesting things they mention here is the mysterious disappearance of Opus 3.5. Before diving into GPT-5, they make a quick stop to talk about this distant cousin, which is also missing in action, Anthropic's Opus 3.5. As you probably know, the top three AI labs, OpenAI, Google DeepMind, and Anthropic, offer a variety of models that cater to different needs across the price, latency, and performance spectrum. For example, OpenAI provides models like GPT-4, GPT-4 Mini, as well as 0.1 and 0.1 Mini. Meanwhile, Google DeepMind has models like Gemini Ultra, Pro, and Flash. Anthropic, on the other hand, has Claude, Opus, and some others like Sun and Hao. The main idea is that all these labs are trying to cover as many customer preferences as possible. Some users prioritize peak performance no matter the cost, while others are looking for more affordable solutions that are good enough for their needs. Now, back to the mystery of Opus 3.5. This was supposed to be part of Anthropic's lineup, but it seems to have vanished without a trace. They were discussing how this model was expected to fit into the series. Take a look at this. Something pretty unusual happened back in October 2024. Everyone was gearing up for Anthropic to announce Claude 3.5 Opus, which was expected to be their big response to GPT-4. Instead, they surprised everyone by releasing an updated version of Claude 3.5 Sonic. Naturally, people started speculating, calling it Claude 3.6. But here's the kicker. Opus 3.5, the one that was supposed to be Anthropic's equivalent of a GPT-5 level model? It was nowhere to be seen. It just didn't show up. This left Anthropic looking like they didn't have a direct competitor to GPT-4 at all. Now, here's where things get really interesting. When you dig into what actually happened with Opus 3.5, the story takes a fascinating turn. So, they were discussing how back in October there was a post on Nuclear Wheat where it was mentioned that there were rumors about Sonic 3.6. This model, which is really impressive, was speculated to be just a checkpoint from a failed training run of the much-anticipated Opus 3.5. At the time, people genuinely believed that Claude Opus 3.5 had been scrapped. Why? Because earlier, there was all this talk about how Opus 3.5 was on its way. It was coming soon. But then suddenly, references to it started disappearing from several web pages, leaving everyone wondering what had happened. Recently, there was an interview with the CEO of Anthropic, and during that conversation they discussed Opus 3.5, which ties directly into GPT-5. The reason we're focusing on Opus 3.5 right now is that it's considered a competitor to GPT-5. So, as we dive into this, we're essentially looking at how Opus 3.5 stacks up as a potential GPT-5 rival, and what the details shared by Anthropic reveal about their approach. Dario Amati, one of the key figures at Anthropic, mentioned that while they haven't given an exact release date for Opus 3.5, the general plan seems to remain focused on launching a version that competes with GPT-5. His statement about the model is cautious and a bit ambiguous, but still holds some weight as we wait for more details to unfold. So, if you look here, you'll notice we're discussing something interesting. Back then, there were a lot of articles in Bloomberg talking about how companies like OpenAI, Google, and Anthropic were struggling to build more advanced AI. This was right around the shift from GPT-4 to what could have been GPT-5. The article was really fascinating because I remember reading it at the time. They were saying that Gemini 2 didn't quite hit the mark and GPT-5 was also disappointing. They compared it to GPT 3.5, and while all of them performed better, none of them were really good enough. So he talks about how Bloomberg wrote an article mentioning that after training the model at Anthropic, they found that the 3.5 Opus, which is a competitor to GPT-5, actually performs better in evaluations than the older version. However, it doesn't perform as much better as it should, considering the model's size and how expensive it was to build and run. It seems that Dario decided not to give a release date because, although the training run for Opus 3.5 didn't fail, its results were kind of underwhelming. What many people missed, though, is that the newer models like GPT-5 and Gemini 2 are actually quite good. The only downside is that they're just too expensive for what they offer. Trust me, you'll want to remember this point, because it's a key reason why these models haven't been released yet. Here's where things get interesting, with some insider leaks. On December 11th, semiconductor expert Dylan Patel and his team at SemiAnalysis dropped a major revelation. They connected all the dots and came up with a surprising theory. According to them, Anthropic had finished training its Claude 3.5 Opus model, and it performed exceptionally well, scaling just as expected. Yet, for some unknown reason, Anthropic chose not to release it. So, despite Claude 3.5 Opus performing at a high level, it hasn't been made public. The twist? Instead of launching it, the theory is that Anthropic used it internally to generate synthetic data and enhance their reward modeling system for Claude 3.5 Sonnet, improving it with real user data. Now, this might sound like a wild theory, but the source behind this leak is credible. They've correctly predicted things in the past, and their track record adds some weight to the story. This is one of the main theories floating around why many believe GPT-5 is alive and well behind closed doors, but hasn't been released yet. When you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Just look at how powerful Claude 3.5 Sonnet is. Many are left wondering why it's so impressive, yet Claude 3.5 Opus is still on the shelf, waiting for its moment to shine. So, what happened here is that Anthropic initially had a model called TRCLA 3.5, but they decided to drop the name because it didn't meet their expectations. Dario, the head of the team, was confident that with a different training run, they could improve the results. They avoided giving a specific date, and Bloomberg later confirmed that while the results were better than existing models, they weren't good enough to justify the cost of running these models. This cost refers to how much it takes to operate these models when people use them. Now, Dylan and his team figured out the connection between the mysterious Sonnet 3.6 and the missing Opus 3.5. It turns out that Opus 3.5 was being used internally to create synthetic data to help boost Sonnet 3.6's performance. So here's the thing. What we're looking at right now is something pretty interesting. Trust me, it's going to connect to GPT-5 in just a moment. If you check this out, we have the GPT Filestar model from Anthropic, one of the biggest competitors to some of the leading labs in the AI space. Now, this model is currently being refined down to Sonic 3.6, which is where they're basically fine-tuning the AI. You could say that they've built an incredibly advanced AI system internally, but it hasn't been released to the public just yet. Right now, the publicly available version is Sonic 3.6, and that's where things are at. But here's the kicker. It's about to get even crazier. If you enjoy this video, don't forget like and subscribe this channel for more updates. See you in next party.